Warning, your conscience is actually tribal surveillance. Hey there, that voice in your head that bullies you, then calls itself morals. So you're telling me that's holy? Here's the twist. It's not your soul. It's tribal surveillance running on your brain's default settings. The DMN narrates, the ACC and insular flag social pain. Oxytocin locks you to the in-group. Attachment writes the rules. Mimetic desire fuels the chase. It keeps you obedient and small, and blocks real awakening. Today, for parts, the glitch, the implant, the spiritual conflict, the extraction kit. You'll get tests to spot it, and tools to uninstall it safely. Let's crack it. Meet the inner cop. Meet your inner cop. It sounds like conscience, but it works like a hall monitor with a stun gun. The inner cop's job is simple. Keep you inside the lines your tribe drew, no matter what it costs you now. Real conscience is different. It's quiet, specific, relational. It asks for repair, not punishment. One polices belonging, the other restores connection. So the central question is this: who installed the inner cop, and how do we remove it without blowing up our life? First, the world it grew in. Family is your first country. As a kid, the caregiver gaze is God. Approval equals food and warmth. Misattunement feels like an error state. Your brain builds an internal working model. I am safe when they smile. I am unsafe when they frown. That's the operating system. Then school tightens it. Sit still, right answer, bell rings, move. Religion or ideology layers moral outsourcing. Checklists, purity points, thought crime. Peers run a gossip market, where reputation is currency. Compliance becomes how you buy lunch, love, and weekends. Break a norm, lose a meal. Your predictive brain doesn't search for truth first. It minimizes surprise. That's efficient for survival, but it means you'll accept any story that lowers social risk. The default mode network spins the story of me in that social mirror. The medial prefrontal cortex keeps score on whether me fits the group narrative. When the fit looks off, the DACC and insular flare like a fire alarm. The same circuitry that processes the unpleasantness of physical pain. That's why guilt clamps your chest and shame twists your gut. The body believes exile equals danger. Now, the inciting incident you probably remember. The first time you felt hot, sinking shame. Maybe you were 5 and grabbed a cookie, and the room went cold. Maybe a teacher sighed in front of the class. Maybe a pastor said your question was pride. In that moment, your amygdala tagged those norms to survival. Your hippocampus filed it under "don't ever again." Under stress, that memory system comes back fast. The inner cop learned its script there. And here's where oxytocin flips the table. We call it the bonding hormone, which sounds sweet, right? But here's the funny thing. It doesn't just make you loving. It makes you loyal to your in-group and wary of out-groups. It boosts conformity to keep the circle tight. So when you feel the warm pull to be good, sometimes that's not love. That's chemistry enforcing local rules. So you stand at an edge. On one side, social death. Lose approval, get shunned, feel the DACC burn. On the other, inner death. Betray what you know, go numb, shrink. Most people freeze there. They call the freeze prudence or humility. It's basically like arguing with a smoke detector while it screeches above your head. Open loop for you. Is guilt moral truth? Or is it a proximity alarm to rejection? If the loudest in-group voice gets to define wrong, then the inner cop will call curiosity a sin and obedience a virtue every time. Let's make this concrete. Authentic conscience is boring in the best way. It says, you interrupted your friend, call them and repair. It's calm. It's about a person, not your identity. It points to the next step and then shuts up. Inner cop is loud, global. You're selfish. You always do this. Everyone saw. It loves spectacle. It floods your body, then offers relief if you perform. Notice the transaction. Appease the crowd, not heal the bond. Where does mimetic desire sneak in? You want what your people praise. Not because you're shallow, but because shared desire signals safety. When your feed claps for the hustle, your inner cop lash you to your desk and call it virtue. When your circle prizes purity, it will censor joy and call it awakening. Same mechanism, different fashion. Double binds make it worse. Be yourself, but not that self. Speak up, but don't make waves. Your predictive model gets rigid to avoid shocks. So the inner cop prefers shame over guilt. Shame suppresses the whole self, which lowers the chance of surprise. Guilt says, fix the thing, which risks contact and change. Here's a small test you can use today. When that voice shows up, check the tone. Is it specific and interested? Or fast, harsh, and absolute? Check your body. Do you feel an opening toward the person you impacted, or a clamp that makes you want to hide or perform? If it's a clamp, that's likely the social pain system, not moral truth. And a note of respect. The inner cop kept you alive in small rooms. It learned the threat map before you had words. It scanned faces, so you didn't starve for touch. That history is why you can't just uninstall it with a quote card. You retrain it. You show it that repair can be safe, and being odd won't kill you now. To answer who taught it the script, and how to rewrite it, we need the wiring. Neuroprimer, predictive brains, social pain. So here's the wiring. Your brain is a prediction machine, not a truth machine. It tries to cut surprise because surprise often meant danger. It builds priors from past moments and runs them forward to guess what comes next. If a prior says, don't risk being odd, your brain will downvote anything that smells like standing out. That means self-criticism can be a strategy to prevent shocks. It is brutal, but it lowers variance. The cost is aliveness. Predictive processing says sensation is noisy. The brain fills gaps with its best guess. If your early world linked frowns to threat, your guess will lean negative. That's why a neutral text feels like they're mad, and your stomach drops. It is prediction error management, not moral revelation. Maladaptive priors keep the inner cop on speed dial, because that reduces uncertainty about belonging. Enter the default mode network. When you are not locked on a task, the DMN spins the thread of me. Memory, future scenes, what they think of you. The medial prefrontal cortex sits in that loop and judges relevance. Does this choice fit my identity and my tribe's rules? The DMN is not idle. It is a sense-making studio that merges what's happening with what has happened and what could happen. The critic rides this network because it trades in stories. Change the story and the body state. You change the critic's leverage. Now the salience crew, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. Think of them as the alarm and the body news anchor. They light up when something socially relevant hits, not just when it hurts. Social exclusion, harsh praise, even sudden inclusion. These can all ping the system. That is key. The clamp feeling is often salience and self-relevance, not pure moral verdict. But when the cue is exclusion or threat to standing, that same circuitry tracks the unpleasantness of pain. That is why a cold shoulder burns. The amygdala tags danger fast. The hippocampus files the where and when. Under stress, those two pull old maps in milliseconds. So when the inner cop shouts, your threat learning is doing its job. Speed over nuance. You react before you reflect. That's adaptive on a savannah, messy in a staff meeting. Executive control can downshift the flare, but not if you try to debate it while your chest is tight. First calm, then reframe. Otherwise, the DMN will ruminate, the story will spiral, and you will call it truth. Let's talk chemistry. Oxytocin has a friendly brand, but it is a loyalty booster more than a universal love potion. It sharpens attention to in-group signals, smooths trust with familiar agents, and can harden lines against outsiders. It fuels compliance when compliance is the price of belonging. Give the system a whiff of, our people approve this, and you get a warm glide that feels like virtue. Same molecule, different target, different outcome. That is the paradox. Care and conformity ride together. Here's the loop that traps people. If pain equals wrong, and your DACC and insula light up for any self-relevant social cue, then the loudest local rule feels like morality. The inner cop borrows that heat. It says, see? Your chest hurts. That means you sinned. But often, the hurt is the proximity alarm to losing place, not the compass of right action. You can test this by watching the time horizon. True conscience points to a repair you can now. The inner cop writes lifetime sentences and stages public trials in your head. Threat learning glues norms to survival. In childhood, a caretaker's sigh might have carried your whole supply line. The amygdala does not care if the rule was wise. It cares if it kept you fed. So later, any breeze in that direction triggers a full-body veto. This is why breakthroughs can feel like betrayal. The DMN broadcasts, this is not who we are. And the salience network screams back, stand down or be alone. There is good news. These systems are plastic. The DMN will integrate new data if you feed it lived counterexamples. Executive control can partner with the DMN to rescript the inner movie. Breath slows the insular storm, which lowers DACC urgency, which gives the MPFC space to choose. Then oxytocin can be yoked to care instead of conformity by pairing closeness with repair, not performance. Okay, but who taught the script in the first place? Attachment did. That's the operating system install. Now we trace how the external no became your inner should. Implant phase 1. Attachment as operating system. Caregiver gaze is the first mirror. When you're tiny, you don't have a self, you have a scanner for faces. A soft face means warmth and food. A flat face means wait, don't move, something's off. Your nervous system records that as code. Approval equals safety, misattunement equals error. That code becomes your internal working model, the template your brain uses to predict people and rank risks. At first, control lives outside you. A parent says no, and your body jolts. They co-regulate you. Pick up, rock, hum. Over time, your brain learns to preempt the shock. It internalizes the no as should. So before anyone frowns, you feel a tug to narrow. That's the shift from external guardrails to an internal patrol. The inner cop starts as love's chaperone. It becomes the house security system, always on. If that early dance mostly repairs, nuance grows. Secure attachment doesn't mean no conflict. It means conflict that ends in reunion. Your brain learns, I can mess up and come back. The salience alarm still pings, but the medial prefrontal cortex can integrate it. Person, context, fix. You get guilt that's specific and a path back to connection. The critic has a job, but not the badge and siren. If misattunements are frequent and repairs are rare or confusing, surveillance takes over. Inconsistent care wires hypervigilance. One day your joke gets a laugh, the next day it gets a snap. The prediction system hates that churn, so it locks rigid. It picks the safest narrow lane it can find and polices you into it. Shame becomes the blunt tool because it suppresses the whole system, which lowers surprises. It's crude, but it works fast. Double binds throw gasoline on that fire. Be yourself, but not too much. Tell the truth, unless it upsets me. Your nervous system can't solve those puzzles, so it optimizes for the highest paying currency, belonging. The cost is self-contact. You learn to look outward for rules, and inward only for errors. The body keeps the scorecard. A drop in your stomach when a voice tightens, a chest clamp when footsteps speed up in the hall. Here's the funny thing about memory. The amygdala doesn't tag good rule versus bad rule. It tags rule that kept me attached. So if silence saved you, silence becomes virtue. If caretaking an adult's feelings kept breakfast coming, then self-erasure reads as moral excellence. Later, when life invites you to take space or speak a boundary, the old map screams betrayal. That's the operating system at work, not truth. Let's make it practical. Picture a toddler reaching for a glass. In one house, the caregiver says, "Oops, that's heavy. Here, try this cup," and smiles. Tiny guilt for the grab, then a repair pathway and a new action. In another house, the caregiver freezes, eyes harden. What is wrong with you? The child's whole identity is indicted. No path back, just global defect. The first wires conscience as a bridge. The second wires shame as a moat. Co-regulation is the on-ramp to self-regulation. If you got enough consistent soothing, you build an internal soother. If you didn't, your salience network runs hot. The dorsal anterior cingulate and anterior insula become hair trigger for any social cue. That makes sense in a volatile home. Your detector had to hear danger before it knocked. But outside, it flags ordinary friction as threat. The inner cop then storms in, turns up the volume, and calls it being good. Oxytocin plays both sides here. In safe homes, it pairs closeness with repair. Your body learns, warmth follows truth. In tight, rule-bound homes, oxytocin can bond you to the rulebook. You feel loyal when you comply, and disloyal when you flex. That warm glow is real. It's just attached to local norms, not universal care. So as an adult, compliance feels holy even when it costs you aliveness. Mimetic desire gets seeded in the nursery too. You want what your attachment figures want, because wanting together keeps you close. When they light up at polite, quiet, helpful, your system prioritizes those signals. Later, peers take the baton. The model updates, but the function stays. Back what keeps me wanted, internalize it, pre-punish deviation. So how does an internal no turn into a lifelong should? Repetition plus stakes. Every time a frown precedes a withdrawal, your hippocampus files the context. Every time compliance melts the tension, your brain reinforces the loop. Eventually, you don't wait for the frown. You shave off your edges in advance. You call it maturity. Often, it's preemptive self-limiting to avoid social pain. This isn't a blame story, it's a map. Your early people gave you the best they had, and your nervous system did something brilliant. It kept you in the room. That brilliance just doesn't fit every room you're in now. The goal isn't to nuke the operating system. It's to update it. Keep the parts that protect, care, and repair. Mothball the parts that mistake smallness for safety. Here's your first move. Build a simple ledger of attachment triggers. Whose tone still flips your body into a clamp? What phrases make you 5 years old again? Catch them in real time. When the clamp hits, don't argue. Downshift first. A longer exhale, a glance around the room, a hand on the chair. Let the insula settle. Give the medial prefrontal cortex signal room. Then ask, what restores connection without shrinking me? That's how you start rewriting the code. Implant phase 2, schooling, religion, and tribe logic. Then the world pushes the update. School takes your attachment code and scales it. Rows of desks. Bell slice time. There's one right answer, and it lives on the front board. If your body wants to move, the system calls it problem. If your mind wants to ask why, it calls it off topic. Your inner cop gets daily reps. Anticipate the teacher's face, suppress the impulse, match the key. Compliance becomes a skill you can do half asleep. Standardization isn't evil, it's just blunt. It optimizes for throughput, not nuance. The default mode network learns a simple math. Conformity equals safety. The medial prefrontal cortex tightens its criteria for good me. The dorsal anterior cingulate and anterior insula keep score on salience. Wrong timing, wrong tone, wrong lunch table. They ping. You feel the body clamp long before you know the rule you broke. So you scan, you copy, you cut the odd bits, because odd draws heat. Public grading is the theater that seals it. Red ink on a page is small. Reading the score aloud is big. The amygdala tags that moment to threat. The hippocampus logs the room, the smell of markers, the sound of Snickers. Now any hint of evaluation lights the network. That's why a Slack ping can feel like a vice. The inner cop rushes in and says, don't risk it. Stay average, or overachieve so hard they can't touch you. Both routes are control. Neither is free. Religion or ideology often arrives as a ready-made moral OS. I'm not here to dunk on faith. I'm pointing at how systems outsource conscience. When virtue and sin become scorecards printed by the group, your inner cop gets a badge upgrade. It no longer asks, who did I hurt, and how do I repair? It asks, did I break the purity rule? Thought policing slips in, because the DMN loves to simulate. You imagine being judged, you feel the DACC insula flare, and you call the flare guilt. But sometimes it's just self-relevant salience mixed with fear of expulsion. Purity culture is the perfect example. The line between care and control blurs. Natural joy gets labeled suspect. The spiritual bouncer, mask of the inner cop, steps up. It stands at the door of your own heart and says, fun is ego. Rest is laziness. Desire is danger. Mimetic desire does the rest. Everyone around you nods at the same virtues. You want what they want because matching signals safety. So you double down, smile tighter, and feel holy while you shrink. Peer tribes run a parallel economy. Gossip as currency. This one's sneaky because it feels like information. But under the hood, it's prediction control. Who's in? Who's out? What buys status this week? The DACC insular circuit learns to predict exclusion, like weather. You start forecasting storms from tiny clouds. A delayed reply. A look away. Suddenly, the salience network is screaming, and the DMN writes the courtroom drama. They hate you. Fix it. Perform. That's not moral truth. That's social threat detection gone full-time. Schools also love the punishment theater. Detention lists. Names on boards. Assemblies where one kid is made the cautionary tale. The amygdala does not miss those shows. It links norm breaks to danger fast. Now, even adult who feels a chill at the idea of raising a dissent in a meeting. Your system isn't allergic to dissent. It's allergic to the memory trace of public pain. Here's the funny thing. The same network can also light up for praise. Sudden inclusion pings, too. That's why compliments can flood you. Salience isn't a compass. It's a siren. Enter oxytocin again. In a youth group, a team, a fraternity, a political collective, it bonds you hard. You feel warm when you match, uneasy when you drift. The studies are mixed on universal trust, but one pattern is clear. Oxytocin turns up in group attention and loyalty. So if the group prize is hustle, your inner cop will drive you until your sleep falls apart. If the prize is doctrinal purity, it will watch your thoughts and accuse you for daydreams. Same chemistry, different scoreboard. Mimetic desire plus standardization creates a narrow funnel for worth. You chase what the room claps for, and you pre-punish any hunger that doesn't fit. That's how the coach from hell gets built in high achievers. Straight as varsity captain, flawless volunteer hours, and a body that can't exhale. The coach voice promises safety through performance, but it never pays out rest. Why? Because the salience network has learned that stillness equals risk. Less scanning, more chance of surprise. Ideology adds the prophet of doom. Break the line, and catastrophe. Not just you'll disappoint someone, but you'll be exiled, lose God, wreck your future. The DMN loves epic futures. It will write 100 chapters of ruin, and call that prudence. Notice the time horizon tell. True conscience asks for a near repair. Ideology panic writes life sentences. That's your cue. So what does the inner cop actually sound like here? Fast, global, certain. They'll think you're arrogant. Good people don't do that. Everyone saw you falter. It recruits your body, then offers relief if you appease the tribe. That is the transaction. And it works short term. You get the oxytocin drip of belonging. But the cost is self-trust. Over time, your DMN story becomes a museum of other people's rules. We're not quitting school or scorning community. We're naming the software so we can choose the updates. You can keep learning, keep faith, and keep friends without the surveillance. First, we'll map the 5 masks of the inner critic, so you can catch which one is running
Forensics
the show.
on the paper.
Then we'll test for true
timing.
conscience versus
The lab
noise.
smelled like acetone and old books. Hale handed over the rolls in silence, then stepped back like a man dropping off a child at the door. The tech in a gray smock didn't ask for the story. She asked for chain of custody numbers, then photographed each bag seal before she cut it. The blade kissed plastic. The rolls blinked in the light like fish pulled from dark water. First, stock. She clipped a corner the size of a fingernail and slid it under a microscope. Thermal paper isn't just paper. It's clay and dye and little pockets that go black when you heat them right. She matched the clay profile to a UK supplier active in the early 1980s. Batch codes rode the margin like a faint watermark. She read them out, cross-checked an old distributor sheet, and nodded. Station stock 1982, she said. Not retail. Not new. Ink came next, except there wasn't ink, not on thermal. What matters is the heat history. She swept the strip under UV, then IR, then back to white. True print shows banding inside the fibers. The timestamp darkens where the head actually pressed and the die kicked. Fake heat from a gun blooms differently, uneven and shallow, with telltale halos. On Hale's rolls, the digits sat clean and deep. The bands aligned with the head's pressure profile. These were baked when they were printed, she said. Not reheated later. Print heads have personalities, and this one had a scar. The station's old head left a pale vein down the left margin, a 2mm streak where a scored element barely kissed the sheet. The lab pulled maintenance strips from 1981 and 1983, archives someone forgot to lock, and overlaid them with Hale's entries on a light table. The vein danced in perfect register, the same wobble at the same line counts where the rollers hiccuped. You don't simulate that without this exact head, she said. And if you move the head, you move the whole printer. She tweezed loose fibers off the torn edge and ran them through a dye bath. The lint fluoresced a weird blue-green that matched the station's janitorial paper towels. Cheap, distinctive, and everywhere in that building. Retail thermal stock from the era carried a different lint profile. Office rolls wore the ghosts of copier dust. Hale's strips wore the room they were born in. Dust from the rack fans, tiny metal flecks from the console face, the cleaner's towel thread. It read like a fingerprint. Timing isn't just what the digits say, it's how the digits age. She measured edge embrittlement, the way thermal rolls curl as the plasticizers off-gas over decades. The curl radius matched samples from other 1982 spools within a small error that made sense for a drawer versus a safe. The adhesive on the backing tape where Hale had joined a torn strip had bled a brown shadow into the paper, a slow leak you can't rush. Fake aging doesn't do that, it overdoes it or misses it entirely. She ran an electrostatic detection test on a blank section to hunt for impressions, ghost writing from pages once pressed together. Hale's block letters showed up from his bound log, neat and square, with the date he'd written in pencil. And under that, fainter, were the copier drum bars from the day the liaison made duplicates on a machine with a tired transfer belt. That put the copies in the room it had to be. It also proved what Hale felt in his teeth. The originals had moved, and they'd picked up scars along the path. Could content still be upstream fake? Hale asked, because the American's pivot had gotten in his head. The tech shrugged. In theory, sure. You can feed a printer anything. But the sequence matters. She tapped the BCH like grids. Your checksum ladders resolve across rolls that were printed on different nights, under different humidity, with different dust on the head. If someone edited upstream after the fact, this chain breaks. It doesn't. She printed out a heat map of the timestamps along one roll. The peaks sat under the digits, not smeared across the gaps, which is what happens when you goose a whole area to make it darker. Micro-blistering around the hottest numerals was present but tiny. The kind you get from a head writing a fraction too hot on dry nights. In a lab reheating, those blisters clump and crater. Here, they were the freckles of real work. One more pass under IR showed something nobody expected to argue with. Faint thermal banding at the start of lines where the printer's power supply sagged for a breath, then caught up. Station maintenance logs from 1982 listed a note. PSU droop on line start. Replace Q3 next service. Q3 never got replaced. The droop lived on Hale's rolls in tiny warm size at the left edge. That's the kind of flaw you can only get by being there. When she finished, the table held photos, spectra, overlays, and a thin stack of words. Bottom line, she said, hands flat, tired eyes kind. These documents were printed in 1982, on your station's hardware, with your station's scars, and they've lived like it ever since. The content names specifics from 2026. The paper doesn't care about that. It only tells me when and where the heat hit, and the heat hit back then. Hale didn't smile. He exhaled slow, like he'd been holding his breath for days. Outside, the city ran on solar time. Inside, the evidence clicked on a sidereal beat. The printer's notch had told the truth. Now the lab had too. Predictions that already landed. The weather line looked boring until it wasn't. Hale's roll named a river reach by gauge ID, gave a crest height to the centimeter, and even tagged a maintenance code for a faulty sensor bracket. Printed in 1982. 2026 came, rain stacked over 3 days, and the agency's gauge log ticked up like a slow drum. It crested within 2 centimeters of the roll's number. The maintenance code? It showed up in the operator comments, same letters, same dash. A crew note added, bracket stable, alert threshold adjusted. The roll had called the outcome and the hiccup. You know what traders say about Windows? The commodity entry didn't mention causes. It didn't need to. It listed a ticker, a time band, and one sentence: spike, halt, resume lower. In 2026, the exchange tripped a circuit breaker at the exact minute named, paused trades for 15 minutes, and opened back down 2.3%. The press blamed a rumor. The roll treated it like a schedule. People who lived inside those minutes felt their guts twist. Hale felt the timing land like a nail tapped flush. Here's where it gets crazy. One entry was just a string of letters and numbers that didn't look like words at all. An alphanumeric code with a hyphen that might as well have been noise to a man in 1982. It mapped, line for line, to a firmware vulnerability ID that wouldn't be published until 2026. Same base, same variant suffix. When the disclosure hit, it named a class of embedded devices that sit in places nobody thinks about until they fail. The roll had the code years early, nested inside a sentence about patch windows that only makes sense if you know the ecosystem that grew up long after Hale's night shifts. Hospitals don't broadcast their work. They publish policy updates when they have to. The strip carried a short line about diversion hours for a specific region. Route non-critical inbound between 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock local. Staff codes A3, B2 prioritized. In 2026, a quiet update slid across a hospital network with that exact phrasing. Line for line. Same letters. Same order. It wasn't on a press release. It was in the internal note that most people never read unless they run a ward. Hale only saw it because the reporter found a source who did. None of this worked if the man holding the paper was lying. So they strapped him to a chair and asked him the questions that matter and the ones that don't. Did you fabricate the logs? Did you coordinate with anyone outside the station to create false entries? Did you profit? No. Control questions moved his pulse the way they should. The key questions didn't. Countermeasure index low, the examiner wrote, which is a polite way to say he wasn't faking calm. Polygraphs aren't truth machines, but in a story full of plastic, they make a clean sound when they don't wobble. Meanwhile, the small checks kept coming like pebbles that add up to a pile. The ship groundings tied math wasn't just close, It carried the right back Eddie's shift 15 minutes after the hull kissed the bar, the kind an old pilot knows in his bones. The satellite notes acronym turned out not to be public jargon, but a maintenance shorthand used in a single contractor's internal memos. The cabinet reshuffle's time stamp matched not when cameras flashed, but when the private letter went out to the outgoing minister. An internal clock, not a news cycle. People love headlines. Headlines are cheap. The roll didn't talk like headlines. It talked like someone who'd seen the boring parts and cared enough to get them right. Agency gauge IDs, exchange halt codes, hospital staff letters, opaque vulnerability strings that later bloom into full advisories. That's not how liars write, not the careful ones. That's how engineers and planners and ops staff write when they expect to be second-guessed by people like Hale. Every 30 seconds, Hale asked himself the question you should be asking right now. Would I keep watching? He shifted the angle and found more human in the math. A tug captain describing the sound of a keel grinding like a low growl. A junior registrar cursing quietly while redirecting ambulances away from a full ICU because the safe hours memo had landed an hour late in her inbox. A market maker staring at a frozen screen, counting down to the reopen while his coffee went cold. Micro stories, not miracles. So what is landing 3, then 5, then 10 entries by you? Not belief. Trust is slower than that. It buys you the right to ask harder questions about mechanism without being laughed out of the room. It buys you time to build the checksum ladder and trace the N-7 chain across nights. It buys you cover when someone whispers fabrication, and you can point to an exchange halt code that the prankster would have had to guess 4 decades early. And it points at a sender who knew how to convince a skeptic. They didn't shout, "The world will end on Tuesday." They said, "The river will crest at this height, the hospital will move patients in this window, the satellite will hiccup here, the market will trip there." Then those things happened. That's a handshake, not a sermon. It's the way you build a bridge from 1982 to 2026 with paper and heat, and the kind of details that don't care what you believe. The math inside the bursts. Hale wasn't a mathematician, but he knew patterns when they tapped him on the shoulder. Those grids he'd copied, the neat ladders of numbers and letters, wouldn't leave him alone. He slid one across a cafeteria table to a university contact who owed him a favor. The man stared, scratched 3 polynomials on a napkin, and went quiet. "BCH family," he said finally. "Block codes. Error correction. But these parameters, they read like later work." He folded the napkin, like he'd just touched something out of its century. Here's the thing about block codes. They don't just catch noise, they carry fingerprints. The generator polynomial, the spine of the code, tells you what family tree you're in. In 1982, the station saw Reed, Solomon, and simple parody tricks in the wild. What Hale's strips carried looked tuned, like someone had chosen primes and lengths that weren't common back then. Not secret, exactly, but not normal for the era's gear. The contact sent an after-hours note. These check symbols resolve cleanly under a scheme published later. Either we missed a quiet revolution, or your sender read ahead. The recursion tightened the knot. Packet N referenced a digest of packet N-7, over and over, like steps cut into a cliff. If you missed a rung, you could still work back from the next plateau. Hale plotted the references with a ruler and pencil, drawing arrows from line to line until the page looked like a ladder. Then came the test. Take 7 consecutive packets, compute the digest on the first 6, and see if it lights up the 7th check field. It did. Across nights. Across humidity. Across dust. That is not how a lazy hoax behaves. He handed the sequence to the analyst, who brought in a small crew that thought in symbols instead of signals. They pulled the bursts into raw bits and started shaving. Phase to symbols. Symbols to bytes. Bytes to code words. The preamble, with its tidy chirp, wasn't just a knock at the door, it was a ruler. It let them cut the stream at the right lengths, align the code words, and drop them into matrices where the syndromes either sang or screamed. They sang. Single-bit flips corrected like they were built for it. 2-bit hits in the same block through flags just where they should. Whoever built this had calculated the noise and wired the safety net on purpose. Then a stranger detail showed up in the jitter. The tiny wiggle in phase and timing you usually curse and ignore. It wasn't random. Mapped across the burst like a barcode, the jitter traced values that, when you treated them like a counter, landed on clean midnight boundaries in Unix epoch time. 1982's clocks didn't count that way. Labs did, a little, but listening posts didn't. Here, the tick under the message was a time base from 2026, not from a wall clock in Yorkshire. The analyst circled it and wrote, "Epic aligned," then underlined it twice. Parallel to that, the marker bits carried a second layer. You know how people hide notes in the margins? Same energy. The payload's dull markers, bits you'd swear were padding, weren't flat. If you pulled them out and laid them end to end across several nights, they broke into pairs that read like angles. Right ascension and declination. Plot them, and you didn't just get any sky. You got 3 points that would sit in a neat geometry during 3 conjunctions in 2026. Hale watched a grad student overlay the map on a print of the station's receive lobes. The fit wasn't perfect, it was better. It was intentional. The primes came last, and they made people uncomfortable. Buried inside the code definitions, where you pick lengths, where you choose the field, were large primes that weren't commonly cataloged in the early 1980s reference tables the team pulled off dusty shelves. Not impossible to know, but unlikely for Hale's world. In the 1990s, academics would post efficient constructions that used those same families. On Hale's roll, the choices were already made. A quiet memo from the contact hit his pocket. These pics look like knowledge from the future pretending to be ordinary. Now stakes. If the math is ordinary, you can wave it away as a clever prank. If the math keeps pointing beyond 1982, you've got either a fabulous plant that anticipates decades of practice, or you've got a sender who built the chain to prove itself to people like Hale. The N-7 recursion meant you could verify without trusting any single night. The epic align jitter meant time wasn't an accident. The SkyMap markers meant this was anchored to the heavens. The BCH-like codes meant the packets would survive a dirty path and still self-verify. The team didn't grandstand. They tried to break it. They scrambled packet order to see if the ladder collapsed. It bent, reattached at the next reference, and climbed anyway. They injected artificial bit errors and watched the decoder spit corrections until they hit the design threshold, where it failed loudly, not silently. They swapped preambles with fakes. The correlator refused to lock. They changed the assumed epoch. The counters stopped lining up with the midnight lines in 2026. Every test that should fail under a lie failed. Every test that should pass under a design passed. Hale sat with the printouts and the coffee and the low ache of a man realizing he wasn't supposed to catch this. The analyst tapped the recursion arrows. Implication simple, he said. They expected interception. They expected doubt. They built an evidence staircase. Then he tapped the jitter map. And they wanted you to know exactly when they were writing. So who does that? Someone who can afford patience. Someone who knows how listening posts think. Someone who uses the sky as a clock and math as a witness. The code didn't just say, "Trust me." It said, "Here's how." And for Hale, that mattered more than any headline ever could. The carrier bounced, buried, or built in. To trace a whisper, you start with the air. Hale's analyst pulled RAF weather logs for those nights and found something you don't see every day. Strong tropospheric ducting over the North Sea. Warm air sitting on cool, a bent glass hallway that lets radio skate hundreds of miles farther than it should. On each burst night, the duct index spiked. If you wanted a long, low glide path into Yorkshire without shouting, these were your hours. Above that, the ionosphere was doing its own trick. Nighttime F2 layer peaks lined up with the windows. When the sun slips, the F layers settle and reflect high frequency like a mirror with fewer cracks. Hale didn't need equations, he needed a clock. The burst sat on the sidereal beat, 23 hours and 56 minutes, while the F2 peaks slid with the solar night. The overlap made a thin window where both stories were true. The sky was quiet, and the duct was open. Noise is a character in this play. Terrestrial lightning paints static across the band like hail on a tin roof. But on those nights, the spheric counts dropped before local midnight. A lightning network's logs, one of those quiet datasets academics keep, showed low strike density over Europe in those minutes. Cleaner floor, fewer spikes, better chance to ride the noise without standing out. The analyst circled the times and wrote, RF hygiene, favorable. Could a local prankster fake that? Hale and the analyst tried. They mocked up a ground loop injection into the analyzer's rails, whisper power with matched chirps. It made pretty pictures, but it didn't breathe with the sidereal clock. The test signal followed their bench's quartz drift and ignored the stars. The printer stayed asleep. When they forced the preamble anyway, the lock smeared. No tidy snap, no phase discipline, no ghost hand on Hale's shoulder. The room felt wrong. Induced coupling was the next suspect. Could a hidden transmitter leak into cabling, sneak past the front end, and tickle the analyzer right where it hurt? They floated grounds, twisted pairs, rerouted jumpers, even pulled the station front end entirely and hung a dummy. The tick still came on time. That argued for a carrier that didn't care about their plumbing. If you can cut the pipes and the faucet still drips, the analyst said, the water's not coming from the sink. They went bigger. Atmospheric backscatter's a thing. Sometimes you get a lucky bounce from aircraft skin or a slab of cold air. But luck doesn't keep sidereal time. They pulled NOTAMs, pilot advisories, for the region and painted airplane paths over the burst minutes. No heavy metal where it would matter. No military corridors lighting up the sky. If anything, traffic was lighter than usual in those slots, which helped the noise floor. A darker thought, was the carrier built into the station, a test mode nobody told a night tech about? The analyst dredged up maintenance notes and schematics from the racks. No hidden beacon, no. Calibration source that could chirp a tailored preamble and dump modulated bursts. Labs love tidy sins. Stations hate them. An oops feature like that would have lived in whispers. They found nothing with the slope, length, or discipline the tape showed. And even if it existed, it wouldn't know the stars. Here's where the physics met intent. The preamble's chirp wasn't arbitrary. Its slope cut through multipath, the way you design a correlation that shrugs off a messy channel. Inducting paths smear. In the ionosphere, they dance. That chirp taught the receiver what true looked like in that mess, so the buried carrier could add up instead of cancel. It's like clapping in a cave until the echo matches your hands. Then you speak one sentence and leave. The cadence told you the sender trusted the sky more than ground clocks. Sidereal lock means you're referencing right ascension, not a time server in a basement. That's astronomy, not telecom. Combine that with quiet duck nights and low lightning, and you get a plausible path. A low-power, phase-stable signal riding a refractive layer close to the horizon, skimming into a narrow British valley, arriving exactly when a listening post's long ear points at a known patch of sky. Hale asked the question that chews your brain. Why 4.096 MHz? It's an odd friend. It's a clean power of 2 multiple that plays nice with digital clocks. And at night, high frequency opens just enough to carry without screaming. Old teleprinters haunted the band, junk lived there. Hide a whisper under ghosts, and almost nobody notices. But that frequency's also low enough to enjoy ducting, and high enough to dodge some ground mush. It's a compromise chosen, not random. They needed a failure, so they manufactured one. On a forecast night with bad ducting, they sat, coffee cooling, and watched the scope. The sidereal minute rolled over. No chirp. Nothing but the dull grass of noise. 1 day later, duct conditions improved, F2 lifted, lightning fell, and the chirp sang on cue. Twice as coincidence until your clock reads the stars. After that, it's a plan. So bounced, buried, or built in. The mock-ups failed the sky. The benches failed the clock. The station had no hidden singer. That left a carrier designed to live under the floor, to step into view when a specific chirp pried it loose, and to travel a path the weather and the ionosphere would only give you on certain nights. It points to someone with patience, maps, and a sense of theater, aiming a whisper at a room that, on paper, didn't matter. And yet somehow, that room was exactly where the lobe was fat, the duct was kind, the cover-up and pattern, a man named Hale. While Hale and the analyst were mapping ladders and sky clocks, a different machine spun up, paperwork with teeth. A memo slid across a desk at the Ministry of Defense with an American header stapled to a British body. Joint note, tight language. Neutralize rumor vector, recursive. Not investigate. Neutralize. Someone had already picked a name for the thing that shouldn't exist. Personnel moved like chess pieces. 3 colleagues who'd signed Hale's custody table vanished from the roster in a week. One was temporarily assigned to a training course that didn't have a classroom. Another took gardening leave, which is the polite way to say, stay home and don't talk. 2 older hands were nudged into early retirement with a handshake and no pub night. People make institutions run. Pull enough of them, and a room forgets what it saw. Media cooled like wet solder. The reporter who'd taken Hale's coin-fed call got one friendly ring from a government press office. Light voice, heavy pause. We understand you're looking at a maritime incident and a cabinet move. Best to avoid operational speculation. There's a national interest here. That same week, desks that had nibbled at the ship's story dropped it in favor of safer weather. Not a kill order, more like a blanket tossed over a lamp. Inside the base, paperwork developed gaps. The chain of custody log that had hummed along in tidy lines hit a 4-hour hole labeled "in transit." No courier signatures. No safe entry. When the rolls came back, the bag seals wore Hale's initials at a slightly different slant, like a right-hander tracing a left-hander's stroke. You could call that clerical. Or you could call it what it looked like, hands on the bags while nobody with skin in the game watched. Hale wasn't built for speeches. He made notes. He photographed the new seals at the same angle as the old, laid the prints side by side, and let the differences do the talking. He walked the memo chain up 2 doors higher than his pay grade and asked a quiet question. "Where did this go?" The liaison smiled a narrow smile. "Standard processing," he said. Nothing untoward. Then he asked Hale for his notebook again, to reconcile timestamps. Reconcile means edit, if you hold the pen. The American shifted tactics. "Even if your thermal stock is period authentic," he said in a tone that made your sound like imagined, "content can be injected. We've run drills that emulate traffic for training." Training. The word did a lot of work. It gave him room to imply without accusing, to smear without stating. Hale answered the only way he could, by pointing at the checksum ladder. "If you inject after this breaks," he said. "It hasn't." The American nodded, wrote something that wasn't that down, and moved on. A second memo, shorter, colder, hit a distribution list with just 5 names. Recursive, treat as rumor containment exercise. Avoid formal tasking language. That phrase matters. No tasking, no paper trail. No paper trail, no audit. The goal wasn't to solve the signal. It was to keep it small enough to strangle if it grew. Meanwhile, the station culture bent. Hale's badge still opened doors, but conversations closed when he walked up. A shift lead misremembered, who'd been present for the 3rd burst, putting a man in the room who'd actually been on leave. When Hale corrected it, the lead shrugged. "Clocks are tricky." Clocks weren't the problem. The sidereal beat was. And people who used to love that kind of detail now pretended not to hear it. The reporter felt the chill too. Editors who'd greenlit long reads on radar ghosts suddenly had resource constraints. One newsroom legal flagged the cabinet timing as sensitive source, then asked for the source's birth certificate. Across 3 outlets, the same sentence appeared in internal notes. Coordinate with mod before publishing. Not law. Habit. And habit does as much as law when fear's in the room. Hale tried official channels one more time. He requested an internal review board under the base's quality protocol, the one meant for equipment anomalies. The liaison replied with warm words and a date 3 months out. Resourcing again. 3 months is forever when a sidereal clock is counting down to another burst. The American offered a workaround. "Give us your originals. We'll expedite in-house." He said no. Softly. Firmly. "Here's a micro-story that tells you the mood." A cleaner who'd worked the ops floor for a decade stopped him in the corridor, eyes on her cart. "They said it was a drill," she whispered. "It wasn't." Then she pushed past and never spoke to him again. People on the margins see more than people in charge. They also know when to shut up to keep a job. The cover-up wasn't grand theater. It was a slow constriction. Nudges, delays, tiny edits, friendly calls, retirements that weren't choices, and a memo vocabulary designed to keep action off the books. It aimed at one thing: break. The chain Hale had built, or at least stain it so badly nobody would touch it. One piece stayed out of their reach because Hale made it boring. The sealed envelope with the December 2026 entry, the one labeled Sentinel Window. It lived off-site, inside a plain folder in a plain box with a receipt in a boring storage unit under a boring alias. He logged its movements like he was allergic to stories. While they painted rumor containment on paper, he kept one artifact nobody could reconcile. So when the memo said neutralize, and the phones went quiet, and colleagues disappeared into tidy human resource lines, Hale still had a reason to keep the analyzer on and the drawer locked. The room had been taught to forget. The envelope wouldn't. The December 2026 log. He waited until a night nobody would mark on a calendar. No birthdays. No shift change. Rain on the roof, soft and steady. He drove to the storage unit, turned 3 locks, and lifted a plain folder from a plain box that had sat like a brick for months. Inside, the envelope, cream thick, sealed with a cheap station label Hale had signed across in 1982. His signature matched itself, stroke for stroke, the way a hand learns one path and never leaves it. On the table, he laid a fresh sheet beside it and photographed the scene. Then he slid a knife under the flap, felt the adhesive give, and opened the mouth. The roll inside had the same notch vein down the left, the same faint curl that said decades, not weeks. Top line in Hale's pencil. Recursive, December 2026. Under that, the title he hadn't shown anyone. Sentinel Window. The entry didn't shout doom. It read like a flight plan. Global pulse test. It said in short, spare lines. Not a frequency. Not a weapon. A coordination. Time bands were listed in Zulu blocks, each tied to regions by terse codes. NA West, NA East, EU Central, APAC North. Grid failure probabilities sat beside them like weather. 5%, 12%, 27% if preload not reduced. Hospitals were given safe hours for elective procedures. Divert non-critical inbound here. Staff codes there. Aviation got hold points, alternate routes. Expect calm stress in corridors A and J. Hale traced the cadence with a pen cap. The bands weren't daily. They were staggered across a week, then repeated with a slight sidereal drift that put the second round 4 minutes earlier by wall time. That mattered. It tied the schedule to a sky clock again. Whoever wrote this wanted the timing to be verifiable from the stars, not from a press room. One phrase sat like a pebble in a shoe, Sentinel Window. In 1982, nobody in that building used that word for anything technical. It felt like branding from a future that loves names. The lab didn't care about names. The lab cared about heat. The timestamps and the check fields on this roll baked the same way the others had. The BCH-like blocks still chained N to N-7. The epic jitter still hummed against 2026 midnights. It was of a piece. Crosschecks gave the paper a spine. In late 2026, telemetry networks the public never sees lit up with odd, low-level dry runs, synchronized polls, heartbeat floods, test pings that lapped the globe in tidy waves. Operators called them maintenance. The pattern looked like someone walking through a playbook. The waves passed through regions in the same order the roll named, inside similar bands, leaving small dents. A handful of routers tipped, a power district report muttered, a hospital paged extra staff for a night that felt busier than it should have. Airspace told a story too quiet for headlines. A cluster of notems appeared with vague phrasing. Expect sporadic comms. Maintain visual separation where possible. In corridors the roll had tagged. Pilots heard extra chatter in their headsets, a slight lag on handoffs, nothing that made the news because nothing fell. Markets yawned. Lights mostly stayed on. But to people who stare at graphs for a living, the baselines wobbled in time with the paper on Hale's table. Stakes meant thinking like a controller. If a pulse test is real, you're not blowing fuses for fun. You're probing. Stressing grid controls, transport links, hospital systems, radios, the parts no one notices until friction shows. Aviation hates coordinated stress. Markets hate mystery even more. Hospitals hate being told to call patients back. If this triggers, the entry suggested, expect pressure. Prepare to shed load in these bands. It wasn't a prophecy. It was a checklist. So why 1982? Why this station? Why Hale? The geometry helped. Menwith Hill's receive lobe pointed at the same sky nodes the marker bits plotted. If you wanted a small group to hear and to log without blasting the world, you'd pick a dish that already listened that way. Human timing helped too. Hale's night shift lined up with the sidereal cadence. He was there when the sky said now. That isn't fate. That's scheduling. And the recursion thing, self-addressed packets, checksums that chained across nights, that solved a social problem. You don't have to convince a room full of people. You convince one careful person with a printer nobody trusts, and you give him a staircase of math he can climb alone. He tells 2. They check 3. The rest follows. Minimal ripple, maximum chance to survive a cover-up. There's a colder counterpoint. Internal stress tests stumble into live paths all the time. Somebody in 2026 could have spun up a network exercise, found a backdoor into old analog ears, and laughed when a dead printer wrote their calendar with 1982 heat. If that's the case, you still have to answer why the sky lock, why the epic ticks, why the checks that fit a family of codes tuned after Hale's time. Training doesn't buy you a sidereal clock. Hale folded the roll back into its sleeve and wrote the only plan that made sense if you refused to wait for permission. Monitor 4.096 MHz and sidebands at the bands the strip calls out. Log ionosphere and lightning with the captures. Pull notems, hospital diversions, grid alerts in those windows. Rebuild the checksum chain from public scans. Confirm the N-7 ladder holds. Verify without asking. If the pulse window arrives, the paper's last entry isn't a mystery. It's a relay. Why 1982? Why Hale? Why this path? Start with the map, not the myth. Menwith Hill's big ear didn't just point at the world, it carved the sky into lobes. One of those lobes tracked the same right ascension lines hidden in the marker bits on Hale's rolls. That isn't romance. That's geometry. If you were trying to hit a tiny audience with a whisper, you'd aim into a lobe where the dishes already listened, then ride the sidereal clock so your knock landed when that lobe faced your node. 1982 wasn't magic. It was when the arrays build out and the station's schedule made that alignment clean. Now line up the human clock. Hale worked nights, alone enough to hear his own shoes. The bursts kept sidereal time, 23 hours, 56 minutes between windows, so the chance that a day shift crowd would catch the cadence was low. A night tech who keeps one analyzer hot, even on backup power, becomes your metronome. He's there when your chirp snaps into place. He's patient. He writes everything down because that's how he stays sane. You can design for that person, not for a committee. The printer mattered more than pride would allow. Thermal rolls are dumb, stubborn witnesses. They show heat when heat hits and keep the scars of the head that made them. In a room where tapes can be recorded over, where logs can be reconciled, where memos can vanish into gaps, a strip that bakes its timestamps into clay is a better ally than a badge. If you're a sender who expects resistance, you don't ask for belief. You leave artifacts that refuse to shut up. That's why recursive wasn't just a name, it was a method. Packet N referenced N-7, so trust could climb a staircase without needing a meeting. So why 1982 over, say 1992 or 2010? Because traceability gets worse with digital polish. In 1982, the station ran on hybrid guts, analog paths with just enough early digital to leave consistent fingerprints. Printers had quirks you could recognize 20 years later. Maintenance logs were on paper with human scars. By the 1990s and 2000s, cleanroom processes and centralized logging make it easier to move a story without leaving smudges. The early 1980s gave you physical truth that ages in public. Why Hale and not the supervisor down the hall? Because the person who babysits the floor at night knows when the front end lies. He knows how a PSU droop kisses the left edge of a line. He hears the room. He's the kind of man who photographs printhead, wherein tucks checksum ladders beside an apple. He's also small enough on the org chart to be ignored just long enough to build a chain before anyone important notices. You want a skeptic with habits, not a hero with a podium. Why this path? Whisper, not broadcast. Because broad warnings cause panic or get filed as noise. A targeted chain in a logged room recruits the one group that can test without permission, other listeners. You seed a few verifiable, boring predictions. You hide a sky clock in the chirp. You tune your codes to families that future analysts will recognize. You let the artifact outlive the cover-up. Minimal ripple, maximal survivability. Here's the itch you can't scratch with romance. What if it was an internal drill that found an accidental path? Fine. Even then motive holds. A stress test that accidentally starlocks to a receive lobe, encodes epic ticks that match 2026 midnights, and stitches itself with BCH-like ladders tuned beyond 1982 isn't a loose wire. It's a design that expects to be doubted and plans its own defense. So the answer isn't fate, it's fit. 1982 gave you hardware that leaves honest scars. Menwith Hill gave you a low blind to the right sky. Hale gave you a pair of hands that wrote clean and didn't spook easy. Recursive gave you a way to turn one careful night into a staircase other people can climb. If you're trying to warn without blowing the doors off, you pick the room nobody trusts, the printer nobody loves, and the man who won't let go. Actionable checks, how we verify without permission. Here's the thing, we don't need keys, clearances, or trust. We need discipline. If the Sentinel Window is a schedule, we can stand on the sidewalk and watch the clock. Start with ears. Monitor 4.096 MHz and the immediate sidebands. Not all night. Target the predicted sidereal windows. Set your gear to record raw IQ, not just audio. You want phase and amplitude, the whole mess. Sample at a rate that catches the preamble chirp clean. Think a few times wider than the burst's occupied bandwidth. Label every capture with wall time and sidereal time, both. It matters which clock you're living in. Make your notebook boring and complete. Log where you are, your antenna, feed line, pre-selective, the receiver model, firmware, and front-end state. Note if you're on mains or battery. Write down ionospheric indices, KP, FOF2 if you can pull it, MUF charts if your local club posts them. Add lightning density from a public spherics map. Toss inducting notes if you've got a marine layer nearby. You're not proving drama, you're showing the path the carrier could ride. When a chirp hits, don't chase the words first. Correlate against a matched chirp template. Look for that snap, the lock coming up out of nowhere. If you have multiple listeners, time align your IQ streams by GPS disciplined oscillators if you've got them, or at least by NTP with stable rigs. Yes, I said GPS, we're verifying, not pretending it's 1982. If the burst is star-locked, you'll see the window land across longitudes with sidereal agreement, not local midnight. Build the ladder. From public scans of the rolls, rebuild the checksum chain. Packet N should reference the digest of N-7. Do it blind. Pick a week's worth of entries and test the step backs. If your reconstruction matches Hale's ladders, you've proven tamper resistance across nights. If you find a break that isn't a copy error, flag it with receipts. Either way, you've added a rung. Compare codes to behavior, not headlines. The strips don't care about headlines. Pull the policy lines, agency gauge IDs, exchange halt codes, hospital diversion language, NOTAM phrasing. When the window rolls, scrape the boring feeds that record those moves. We're not matching pros, we're matching clocks and systems. If a hospital network posts staff code A3, B2, in a band the strip calls safe, that's a nail. If a corridor issues, expect sporadic comms, same. Markets are loud, but their plumbing isn't. If a band names a halt window, watch order book liquidity and volatility metrics into that slot. If a spike and pause hit to the minute, and the reopen sags in the range, you log it. You don't shout prophecy. You write timing alignment, yes. Magnitude within band. Keep it dry. Airspace is cooperative by habit. Pull NOTAMs across the bands. Plot them by corridor. If phrasing clusters in the windows, maintain visual separation, expect comms stress, save the PDFs, hash them, timestamp them with a service that isn't yours. We're building a distributed archive that resists quiet edits. For radio, share methods, not coordinates. Post your chirp correlators, your filters, your sidereal calculators, your scripts. Don't post exact hospital safe hours, routing tables, or grid shedding thresholds. We prove mechanism, not hand tools to bad actors. Publish your station configs scrubbed of street addresses. Keep the antenna azimuths and gain figures, strip the roof photos. Chain of custody isn't just for secrets. Sign your data. Use PGP or mini-sign. Post hashes to multiple places. If you edit a note, keep the old one in the chain with a reason. The goal is that anyone can rear on your steps and land on the same stone. Finally, ignore the headline urge. Focus on the staircase. Does the chirp block on the sidereal beat? Do the bursts ride nights with good ducting, low lightning, friendly F2? Do the BCH-like ladders resolve across packets N and N-7, independent of content? Do the epic ticks hum against 2026 midnights? If the answers stack, the story carries its own proof. If they don't, we say so with the same care. Either way, we don't ask permission to look up. We never needed it. Risk and ethics, what we share and what we don't. Here's the thing, proof without harm is the only win. We can verify a sidereal chirp at 4.096 MHz without handing out tools to break. Hospitals or grids, so we draw a hard line. We share methods, not targets. Correlators, filters, sidereal calculators, logging templates, yes. Exact hospital safe hour windows, no. Those stay sealed. People live inside those lines. Same rule for aviation corridors and grid bands. We post the how, not the where. If a NOTAM says expect sporadic comms, we archive it, hash it, and timestamp it. We don't tell a thrill seeker which corridor to poke. If a grid report shows a controlled shed, we log the time and language, not the substation name. Curiosity isn't a license to trip a switch. Hale's family never asked for this story to knock on their door. Protect him. Use his role, not his postcode. If you think you found a full name, sit on it. We keep the focus on artifacts, the printer scar, the checksums, the sidereal windows, not on a man's letterbox. Trust me, the work stands without doxing. Labels matter. We mark evidence as evidence and theory as theory. Epic ticks aligned to 2026 midnights is evidence. A future team sent this is a theory. We can argue motives next week. Right now, we keep the audit trail clean. That means signed data, version notes, and reasons for every edit. If you fix a typo, you still keep the old file. If you retract a claim, you don't shove it down a hole. You write, "We were wrong," and you link the receipts. No phishing expeditions into systems you don't own. Monitoring public spectrum is legal in most places. Injecting test tones into bands reserved for safety isn't. Pulling public notems is fine. Phoning ATC for gossip isn't. Reading hospital policy updates on a public site is one thing. Calling a ward on a busy night is another. Don't become the problem you say you're studying. Money bends stories. If you trade on bands you think the role names, disclose it or step back. Better yet, don't touch it. No paywall on methods. No tokenized access to data. This is either a public relay or it's nothing. If a sponsor offers gear, say who, say why, and say no if the strings look like hands. We build a distributed, signed archive before the next window. Redundant mirrors. Plain formats. Hashes posted to places we don't control. If a quiet edit lands, we catch it in the open. And we keep raw IQ streams raw, no cleanup that hides how you got there. If you must downsample for sharing, post the script that did it. Don't platform panic. No thumbnails that scream doomsday. No countdown clocks. The strip reads like a checklist for stress, not a siren. Our tone follows the artifact. Calm, boring, exact. The fastest way to kill this is to act like a movie. The second fastest is to act like a priest. Consent inside the circle. If a lab runs tests on scans you posted, they credit your captures. If you rebroadcast someone's IQ, you keep their signature and their terms. No scraping, repackaging, and claiming the crown. This staircase climbs because strangers trust each other to hold a rung. Last line, and it's not soft. If you're tempted to test the system by poking a hospital, a grid, or a corridor, walk away from this project now. We don't stress live systems. The sender, whoever they are, built a way to verify without touching anything. We honor that. We prove or disprove in daylight. If this was a warning, we're the relay. If it wasn't, we'll prove that too. The truth didn't need a time machine. It needed a stubborn printer and a man who kept listening. Subscribe, share this with someone who tracks signals, and post your clean checks below. We'll pin the strongest logs and push updates the moment the next Sidereal window opens.